1188 2NZ, New England's home of classic gold. It's Thursday, the 30th of May. The time's 7 minutes past 8. You're with Monty in the morning, and I'm pretty excited. We have a very special guest joining us on the phone at the moment. We have Dr. Michael Curry, who's a paleontologist at UNE in Armidale. G'day, Michael. How are you this morning?
I'm good, thanks, Monty. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat to us this morning.
No problems at all.
Now, the reason why we're talking is while the drought is devastating and we want it to lift as soon as possible, it has given something pretty amazing to surface, pun intended, in the Barwon, at the Barwon River near Walgett.
Yeah, look, drought's a terrible thing, but the Barwon River at Walgett, it's actually dry for one of the first times in living memory. And what that's enabled is people to explore the river in a way that they haven't been able to in at least the last 100 years. And what's happened is some of the local elders out there have been walking the river to try and find some old sites from some of their stories and stumbled across some fossils in the riverbed. Now,
these aren't just ordinary fossils, are they?
No, these are pretty unusual fossils. They're from a time period in Australia, which was really just before Aboriginal people first arrived here, when we had some really, really big animals.
Wow. Now, I was looking at the article that I saw here, which was in the Armidale Express. Yep. Some of these animals are pretty amazing. There's the now I'm hoping I say these ones right. Megalolania, is that right?
Yeah, sure. So Megalania is a giant goanna, and it was related to goannas that are alive currently in Australia today, but it was much, much bigger. Whereas goannas in Australia now get to maybe 2.5 metres long for something like a big Parentian might weigh sort of 50 kilos, 70 kilos. These guys were about 6 metres long, 6 to 7 metres long, and they weighed as much as a small or medium-sized car. They were sort of in the range of 750 up to sort of 1,200 kilos in weight.
And these
were massive.
And these were full-on predators too. They had razor-sharp teeth, and they also had venom glands. It's almost like if you're 6 metres long and you've got razor-sharp teeth, the venom glands are a little bit of overkill, aren't they?
Yeah, they would be a bit of overkill. So goannas in general do have remnant venom glands in their teeth and jaws, just like snakes do, but in a different way. And most of the goannas alive today still have the ability to produce some venom.
Oh, okay.
But even Komodo dragons, which are closely related to Megalania, and there's been some studies done that the skull, while it was probably about 1 metre long and the teeth were razor sharp.
That's incredible.
Actually a bit weak in a few spots. So we think that Megalania probably hunted by rushing up and biting an animal, introducing a bit of venom into the wound it created, which encouraged bleeding and shock.
Wow.
And then just sort of followed the animal around till it fell over and then ate it after that. Yeah.
Which is something that the Komodo dragon currently does, isn't it? It'll bite its prey and then just follow it around and wait for it to die from the venom.
Absolutely. And some of these big lizards have got a major advantage of not needing a lot of energy to just walk along behind things. So they could track you for probably 100 kilometres across the desert while you slowly bled to death and then eat you. And Komodo dragons definitely employ the same kind of feeding behaviour and hunting behaviour.
Now the next one that they've found, now this I'm not even going to try and attempt to pronounce this one because if I say it wrong I could end up losing my job. It's a 300 kilo wombat.
Yeah, yep, right. So this is an animal called Phascolonus.
That's it.
And Phascolonus was basically, if you took a wombat that was alive today that you might see sort of down in the south end of New England and scaled it up to 300 kilos in size, that's pretty much what Phascolonus would have looked like. It had these amazing shovel-like teeth on its lower jaw, which we're not really sure exactly what they were used for, but it was a really big wombat, and it had all the anatomical features of modern wombats. So we think it may have even been at least digging sort of scrapes, if not full-blown burrows back then.
And that's incredible. Like just the size of these animals is just incredible. The next one is now I'm going to try this one, Protemodon, a wallaby that's twice the size of a modern grey kangaroo. Did I get that close?
That's right. That's very close. Protemnodon. Yep, absolutely. So these guys were browsing wallabies, and we found them over a lot of basically Queensland and New South Wales, and yeah, they were quite big. So they're not the biggest kangaroo to ever live. There's an even bigger kangaroo than that called Procoptodon, which had really massive arms, but a face that looked more like a koala. And those guys stood even taller than Protemnodon. But yeah, Protemnodon again is something you wouldn't want to run over with your car on a dark night.
No.
It's a huge animal, probably weighing around 170 kilos.
Wow, that's incredible. And now the next one that I've got here, Diprotodon. Now we had a bit of a joke in the office about this yesterday because it's relative to the wombat and the koala, but it's the size of a rhinoceros.
Yeah.
And the joke that we had in the office about this one yesterday is a missed opportunity. We could have actually called that the drop bearosaurus.
Absolutely. This is a huge animal, probably somewhere around about 3,000 kilos in weight, and they're actually surprisingly quite common to find in the New England area. So there have been Diprotodon found in Inverell and Glen Innes, and also further out west, and they appear in creek beds sort of fairly commonly, and we're not sure if it's because they were more common or because they're very, very obvious when people find them. These bones are massive, and if you pick one up and looked at it next to like a cow or a horse, they're obviously much, much bigger than that. And so we think people might report them more often than say, something like Protemnodon, which someone could mistaken for being an extremely large modern kangaroo. And so we do find these guys fairly often. So there's one... a fairly famous one that was recovered from Tambar Springs in early maybe even in the 1990s, which is currently a Coonabarabran in the information centre there, and you can go in there and see the entire skeleton of a Diprotodon laying on the floor in the tourist information centre there.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I found incredible in this, right, they're saying that they roamed the bush from about 2 million years ago, but it wasn't until about 50,000 years ago that they became extinct.
Yep.
That would mean that the first peoples that arrived in Australia would have encountered these animals.
Oh, definitely. And we're not sure why they became extinct then. All the modern Australian animals that you know of today, like kangaroos and wombats and koalas, they were all alive during the same period. So all of those animals lived together for nearly 2 million years. And then suddenly all the big animals like Diprotodon and Megalania all disappeared over a fairly short period of time, sort of around the same time that Aboriginal people first made it to Australia. And there's a bit of a debate as to whether there was a shift in the climate back then that allowed Aboriginal people to actually get to Australia. May have been the same shift in climate that started to put pressure on some of these big animals and they couldn't survive. And of course, there's another argument that Aboriginal people hunted some of these guys and changed the land enough that they couldn't survive. And what it will probably be is a combination of the two things, a bit of pressure from human hunting and land clearing and pressure from climate, and that sort of caused them to die out over that time period. But absolutely, it would have been a very different experience camping in the bush for some of the first people to come to Australia. These things would have been extremely dangerous. Megalania, obviously, there's another animal which we haven't found yet, which we've been in the Barwon River fauna, but we've been looking for, is an animal called the marsupial lion. And when you're thinking about drop bears, this is probably the quintessential drop bear. These guys were related to wombats and koalas again.
Right.
In fact, they're closely related to koalas, but they could climb extremely well. And they were very, very well adapted for being carnivores. They had huge, sharp, blade-like teeth. Their side teeth were like a pair of garden shears almost. They're massive tooth in the side jaw, and they could have easily just bitten through. They've got such a strong bite force, they could easily just take someone's head off. They were a big, ferocious, carnivorous wombat. And these guys would have been would have been extremely dangerous to be in the bush with.
And as the First Peoples, can you imagine going to, say, the Walgett area, or even up here, like, as you said, most of these roamed all through Australia.
Yep.
Being the first persons to arrive, it's like, oh, this looks like a really good place to set up camp. This will be great, except for that massive lizard that's running at me at the moment, that's 6 metres long. The thing that's up in the tree that's trying to eat me, it's incredible.
Yeah, we also had some massive snakes that would have been able to easily sort of constrict a person as well.
Wow.
And there's even some other animals. There's a terrestrial crocodile that would have been able to travel quite long distances over land and was again huge. And there's also some extremely large, dangerous geese.
Wow.
That were
Geese?
bigger than emus. And would have been, again, something you really want to avoid. So it might have looked like paradise when people first arrived, but, yeah, it was certainly not a safe place to be.
So so Australia's reputation of everything here wants to kill you pretty much dates back to prehistoric times.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's right.
Now, you have got a bit of a race against time with these bones and fossils that you're finding, because we're all hoping for rain. And as soon as the rain comes back, the Barwon River's going to start flowing again, and you're going to lose those sites. How quickly, how much of it do you think you're going to be able to get out, hopefully before the rain comes back?
Okay, so the Barwon River is an interesting river in that it's probably, the current course of it is probably quite young. It probably hasn't been flowing the way it has for more than maybe even a few hundred years. Excuse me. So what our race is to try and find where these bones have come from. It seems to be that the river has cut through maybe an old lake bed or maybe an old riverbed, and washed the bones down into the bottom of in the bottom of the river here. We're now trying to figure out, using various clues, where those bones might have come from before the river opened them up again. So if we can find that place is high up on the riverbed, then we're okay. But it's also quite possible it's down in the lower riverbed. So we're working hard to try and track down the location of where the bones have actually washed out from, and it's really important to try and find that before the rain comes back and the river fills up. They did release some water down the Barwon recently, but I don't think it's made it as far as some of the fossil sites we've been looking at.
Right.
But we are finding more and more stuff.
Wow.
All the time. So, yeah,
it's
a race against the clock.
It must be pretty exciting for your field as paleontologists to find it sounds like a very rich find of fossils and bones. Has it sent a bit of a stir through the paleontologist community, and is it going to help kick along a lot more research?
Yeah, look, Megalania is an interesting animal because it's not commonly found. In fact, we don't have a full skeleton of one at all. We have a bit of some parts of its skull, but not a complete skull. We don't even really know exactly how its legs were placed or anything like that, because we don't have enough of the skeleton to do a full anatomical reconstruction. So finding multiple parts of Megalania from the same animal is really exciting, and it's something that gives us hope that there might be more of the skeleton there, and it may be, laying there underneath the dirt, just off the side of the Barwon somewhere, and we're going to be able to find it, which would be amazing and would be sort of groundbreaking discovery in terms of research of this animal.
Absolutely. And what you found there, as you said, the Aboriginal elders are having a look along there. Are you in communication and talking with the elders about what that could mean for perhaps some of their history and the stories that have been passed down?
Yeah, look, so there's a couple of interesting ideas that are around there, and it's easy in hindsight to sort of link things together, but a lot of Aboriginal communities, a lot of Aboriginal groups have stories about, say, a big animal that lived down near the waterhole, and if you went down there in the evening, it would sort of spring up out of the bush and grab you and eat you. And this story is quite a common theme through a lot of different Aboriginal groups all over Australia, and certainly it's there at Walgett. People have come and told me the story quite a few times. And interestingly, the more we find out about some of these animals, especially the marsupial lion, we find that it could spring up out of the sort of bushes and grab something. Its back legs and tail were designed so that it worked sort of like a coiled spring and could launch itself. It had these huge paws with massive claws in it for holding something down, and it sort of it captures people's imagination because these stories have been passed down for so long, and they would have been really important back when Aboriginal people first came, that people knew how to avoid marsupial lions, and so they didn't get eaten. And some of these stories sort of work even better once we reconstruct some of the animal behaviours and link it, link it back there, and people's imaginations are really fired up.
I bet.
So there's been a lot of talk in the community, and lots of stories have been told about maybe this animal is one of our Dreamtime animals, and maybe Megalania is one of their. There's an important story out there about a big reptile like walking up and down the river, and maybe that is actually linked back to an idea of the first people to arrive there when they saw Megalania.
And those sort of stories, and having any kind of description of something like that, and you find a Megalania, it must help to be able to do those reconstructions. If you find 2 or 3 bones, it must help you to be able to get a better picture in your own mind of how this animal would have looked.
Absolutely. And sometimes we've been lucky enough to find cave paintings, especially in Arnhem Land, that are very, very old and we think depict some of these animals as well. So that I guess, from a scientific point of view, we're looking at very cold, dry facts about how far could its shoulder rotate, again, between its shoulder blade and its upper arm, how far could it open its mouth, how strong its tail and back legs were, could it withstand the force of leaping. So sometimes we're very, very dry and austere about some of the details of these animals, but certainly we need ideas from somewhere, and sometimes we see these cave paintings and it adds colour and another dimension to the animals we're looking at. So there are some unusual animals depicted in very old cave art that have stripes and spots and other colours on them, and we think, wow, is this what the animal really looked like in real life, rather than us thinking about it as a collection of bones and muscles.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, Dr. Curry, I'm very sorry, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for having a chat to me this morning.
No, thank you. It's been great. Yeah.
It's been very interesting, and I hope everything goes well. I hope you get more bones, find what you're looking for before the rain comes back, because I've got to say, as fascinating as that is, I hope it starts raining soon.
Yeah, so do I. Absolutely. I'd sort of forego the knowledge that we're getting for some decent rain at the moment to help people out there. But if anyone does find any bones that they are interested in and can't sort of identify off the top of their heads, UNE's always, the paleontology lab there are always willing to jump in and help people identify stuff that they've found. So if you do find something like these guys did, let us know. It could be a really important discovery.
Fantastic. Dr. Curry, thank you so much for your time. You have a fantastic day.
You too. Cheers. Thanks, Monty.
1188 2NZ, New England's home of classic gold. That was Dr. Michael Curry, a paleontologist from UNE, about an amazing find that they've found at the Barwon River at Walgett. All right, coming up next.